Christmas is one of the times when grief seems to hit us the hardest. And so, how do we respond to this grief that comes into our lives? For many of us, we try to suppress it, to overwhelm ourselves with happiness, to dampen our emotions, or to drown them perhaps in alcohol or drugs. But I've got 5 simple steps to help us navigate grief this Christmas. The first of those is very simple, but perhaps something that we don't think of, and it is to anticipate grief. You know that every Christmas, when you have lost a loved one, when you have had relationships that have broken, when life hasn't gone the way that you've expected it to, you know that Christmas, this time of celebration, when we're so excited about all the wonderful things that are going on in our life, and you see happy people left and right, you know that that's going to stir up emotion in you. Yes, you're going to be happy for others. It's also going to spark grief in your soul. And so I want you to prepare yourself by recognizing that it's going to come, and perhaps even recognizing the times in your life in which you are more likely to be triggered with grief. My wife and I, about 6 years ago, a little over, our one of our sons passed away. And we know that every time we are around our kids, and our kids are around the cousins, and our minds start going, and we wonder, all right, what would Philip's role in all of this have been? There are going to be times for those of you who have had someone older that has passed away where you're going to have things that they would have said or done that are missing from your Christmas experience. And so understanding and anticipating that grief is coming and preparing yourself, knowing that is a part of your Christmas experience now. The second way that we can navigate grief this Christmas is to actively choose not to suppress our grief. Now, this doesn't mean that we blow up and we make everything about our grief. We still want to be kind and compassionate and understanding for those who are celebrating, those who might not understand the grief that we're specifically going through. But you don't need to suppress your grief. Sometimes you may need to move it off to the side, whether it's saying, all right, I'm going to make time to deal with this later. Sometimes it may be removing yourself from the situation so that you can grieve appropriately. Shortly after my son Philip had passed, I went to a gender reveal party. And it was a good party. It was a great time to be around family and friends. But when the time came for the actual gender reveal and everybody congregated together, I stayed back. I stayed in a different room. I wasn't a part of it. I listened to what happened afterwards, but I allowed myself that space to grieve without making their joy about my grief. I hope that makes sense, that we can choose to create a safe place for our grief to be expressed in a way that it doesn't steal the joy from others. And kind of piggybacking on that is our third one: carve out time to grieve. recognize that there are going to be just moments of excruciating emotional pain. And every time that I have suppressed my grief and tamped it down and not given it an outlet, it has caused regret, it has caused shame, it has caused guilt. But when we provide a space to grieve, then we allow ourselves to experience the fullness of the joyous emotions at Christmas time. I remember shortly after my grandpa had passed, he passed just before Christmas. And one of the hospitals that had treated him had a memorial service where everyone came together, and they have a specific tree where there is where that they decorate, and it is specifically there to remember those who have passed away. And so when we allow ourselves a space that's dedicated to grief, then it can actually help protect us from that grief invading and overwhelming every area of Christmas. 4 is going to feel a little counterintuitive compared to some of the things that we've been talking about. 4 is infuse your grief with joy. As believers, we know that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. We know that God brings redemption, and we know that even the death of Jesus, God was able to redeem. If he's able to do that, he's able to redeem any situation, any loss that we are grieving ourselves. And so when you are grieving this Christmas, look for ways that God is using and redeeming that situation. Now, redeeming isn't wiping out that situation. Redeeming is taking the bad and bringing good out of it. And when we recognize that God is bringing good out of even crappy situations like death and brokenness, then we're at least able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So look for God's redemption. Also, there are times when you can bring laughter and joy to the situation. Remembering something funny that someone would say, there, whether it was intentional or not, remembering the levity that they brought, or even their awkwardness brought. Remember positive times and recall that to your mind, so that you're not just remembering, oh, I've lost this, but you're cherishing the memories. So infuse your grief with joy. Next is number 5, and I've got a bonus one after this, but 5 is share your grief. You are not in this alone. You don't have to do this by yourself. Trust some of the people that are around you and maybe say, hey, if I disappear, I'm not angry or anything. I just need to process my grief. Maybe reach out to some of the people in your Sunday school or small group or church and let them know, hey, you know what? I'm struggling. Pray for me. Romans 12:15 says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Part of being A part of the Christian body is carrying each other's weights and burdens together so that we know that we're not alone, so that we know that there are people who are caring for us, who are praying for us, who are compassionate when we need compassion. And finally, our bonus way to navigate grief at Christmas is take your grief to God. God is so amazing and powerful and loving, and He is able to empower and to equip us to truly experience His care. And He does care about what you're going through. Isaiah 53 verse 4, in talking about the promised Messiah, Jesus says, "Surely He has borne our grief and carried our sorrows." Jesus has been there. Jesus is with us. Jesus came because He knew that the world we're in is broken by our sin and rebellion, and He came to fix it. Now, everything's not fixed yet, but He's in the process of restoring things. And we can trust Him with our grief. We can trust Him with our sorrow. So take your grief to God this Christmas. He knows that the world is broken, and He can bring us comfort and joy better than anything else. Let me know if this has been helpful, or share it with someone who is experiencing grief this Christmas. God bless.